Om Shanti, and welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. Om Shanti, we're going to repeat that again. Welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. Our Instagram just started as well, so all good. So we will start with a reflection for tonight's topic, which is seeing the benefits in everything. Seated comfortably, I take my attention to my physical eyes, those windows I look out through to the physical world. Do we all see everything in the same way? Or is how we see colored by an inner lens? Just as we wear physical glasses to bring things into focus, to change how our physical eyes might see, perhaps there's an inner lens too, that in some way shapes how I see the outer world. An inner eye. And that inner eye can be more powerful than even the physical eyes and how I interpret the outer world. Can I go inside and inspect my inner eye? The eye that's shaped by attitudes, memories, past experiences, imprints, paradigms, perspectives, even cultures and customs and systems. So many facets to what creates that inner eye. And that is the lens through which I see the outer world. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. For those who have just joined with us, again, the topic for this evening is seeing benefits in everything or in all. I find that this is a very unique topic that I always find interesting. There is a term in Hindi in this particular study of Raj Yoga, which is Trikaldarshi, which means to see the three aspects of time. And one of the things that I remember hearing about it in terms of this phrase is that whatever has happened in the past was good, whatever has happened in the present is better, and whatever is to happen in the future is best. And when I first heard that, I was always wondering, well, how is that any different when people say there's always, a reason for something? There's always something good that comes. I mean, you hear that all the time. And I've always felt that this study is very unique. And so I do feel like there's some perhaps maybe old ideas that may seem like it's very useful, but when things happen, um, do I really feel that way? So I'm not sure if you can clarify that.
Yeah, there's one thing in saying, whatever's happening is beneficial in almost a blind or hopeful way versus actually based on some understanding. And what Darshi is actually suggesting or reminding us is that things don't happen in isolation. So whatever I'm seeing has a past or back story and is actually leading somewhere. Whereas we tend to take things in isolation, and that means without any understanding. So, I can see someone behaving in a certain way or a scene unfolding, and it's as if I don't actually know what led up to it or where what it's the precursor to. And if we were watching a movie, that would be crazy if I just walked in the middle, watched one scene and left and came to the conclusion or interpreted the whole story based on that one scene. I really want to know the whole storyline. And I say, oh, it makes total sense. It all fit together perfectly. It was an amazing story. So Darshi, first and foremost, is suggesting that there is a story here, to not take things out of isolation. And that's where it's saying, from that place, it's saying whatever's going on is beneficial. In other words, completely appropriate, versus blindly taking a scene in isolation and hoping it's beneficial. And then we'll say, you have to wait and see. So I'm actually saying this from an understanding, basic understanding, that every scene has a backstory and then is intentionally leading, is necessary to lead somewhere else.
How does soul consciousness help me in terms of this element of understanding?
We compare soul consciousness to opening the third eye or having sight, coming to my senses, if you will. Without soul consciousness, I am sort of very wrapped up in what we call an illusion. And so I'm looking at everything through a lens of an illusion, which is like a fun house kind of situation. It distorts everything. It's going to be distorted by desires, by fears, by insecurities, by expectations, all the different aspects that emerge when I'm not soul conscious. So that will completely distort or blur how I'm looking at things.
So would you say that it would then be the sphere you're talking about in these illusions? Is that I would actually be way too caught up in this, in all these other things, that I wouldn't even be able to let go enough to feel that there's benefit in every situation?
I would be trying to shape what I think is beneficial, and that may or may not be what actually happens. So I won't have that objectivity. If I was to take these glasses off, everything becomes extremely blurry, and I'm sort of trying to guess at what these different shapes are out there. I can't see them clearly, so I'm coming up, I'm trying to fill in the blanks with my own stuff versus actually seeing what's there. And that's what happens when we're not soul conscious. We lose that, we say, detached observer, that clarity, and we start to fill in the blanks with our own expectations, experiences, memories, hopes, desires. And that's where and then if things match up with what we sort of generate, then we say, yeah, no, that was beneficial. But when it doesn't, we're still very confused.
Mm-hmm. I'm reminded when you're sharing, some of you have heard about this in our previous sessions. Some of you may have heard it during the discussions of our pure thinking versus positive thinking course. Some of you may not have heard it at all, but it's about this aspect of this blind hope. or perhaps my opinions of trying to see something good that comes out of whatever situation I am, versus this absolute broad perspective that actually goes into the unlimited eternal understanding. Would you say that that is what this is about in terms of seeing the benefit in every situation, which can only be possible when I'm soul conscious, because I'm beyond all these temporary desires and perceptions, and I would say opinions of what is beneficial?
Yeah, I'm kind of almost in a fearless state. I had a funny conversation with someone who's actually a doctor, so I didn't know how this was going to go. I don't even know how we got to this place. But we're talking about, I know, it was random acts of kindness, because Random Acts of Kindness Day is coming up, February 17th. And so there's a little initiative going on, the facility we both access, and we're chatting because you're asked to perform a random act of kindness. And we were saying, because you have to document that you've performed it. I thought, well, the moment you document it, it's no longer a random act of kindness, And she said, for example, I cleared the neighbor's sidewalk of snow. I don't even know my neighbors. I mean, she knows her neighbors, but not the sidewalk. She goes, I don't even know them. It doesn't even matter. They don't even need to know. I don't even need to know. So it was a very fun conversation. She said, in general, we just need kindness. We just need kindness all the time. It shouldn't be random. So we're discussing this. She says, yes, kindness. The exception might be if maybe someone comes to stab me. And I was saying, yes, but even then, there must have been something that happened to that soul that led them to the place where they're trying to stab you. There must be a story. And she looked at me and she said, you're right. And that would change the feeling. And I'd probably think that way. Maybe if I survived the stabbing, we could talk about it. Like, I was surprised how open she was, because most people say no. So, we think, oh, a stabbing is bad. If I'm soul conscious and I realize I am indestructible, I mean, obviously there's a lot more to it, and this is a very far-fetched example, but it really does blow it wide open, is what we're saying in terms of how we're going to interpret things and what we'll think is very severe and what isn't, and the different ways we're capable of thinking when we're that free and fearless and full, which is what soul consciousness affords us.
Now, I hope this doesn't feel like it's an irrelevant question, but it comes up a lot in terms of when we think about soul consciousness, we're just talking about just not being afraid of death. But it does feel like self-value is a huge, huge piece of worth. There's a huge piece that I don't know if souls really ever think, consider myself to be a soul has anything to do with self-respect or self-worth. I know you're using that stabbing incident, but I mean, it could come to the point of why me? Why are all these bad things happen to me? And that's an extreme example, but just day-to-day things, and how to be able, where is that link in terms of, how does soul consciousness help me to really not get into these perhaps maybe just victimizing perspectives that doesn't help me become objective?
The example you gave is also connected to fear of death. There's two kinds of death. One is physical, and the other is ego or image. And so it could be the destruction of the body or physical identity, or the destruction of the image, the value, the ego identity. They're both a death. They're both connected to fear. If I'm liberated from both of those fears, it completely changes how I interpret and see and feel. So it really, they are connected. Yes, one I've sort of invested my life in, the other one my value in, but they both, if either feels threatened, then I will come up with all sorts of paradigms or perspectives to try to protect them, and victim is one of them. And that again will distort how I see things.
Now, when you were first explaining about this aspect of, that there is a reason for things happening, And that really helps if I really had a unlimited perspective. Of course, when there's soul consciousness, one of the other aspects that comes up in the study of Raj Yoga that we know is a very sensitive topic is this aspect of karma. And so that we perhaps don't have a very healthy understanding of it. And it does feel like this aspect of soul consciousness is very relevant to that. And how does that help? Because I think many feel that when they hear the word karma, the way they even use them, I've heard it in day-to-day language, is always like, a bad thing, basically.
Or revenge.
Yeah.
Karma will get them.
What goes around comes around.
Karma is very beautiful. It's what it's actually doing is suggesting that things aren't happening in a haphazard way, and we're simply just hoping to get through the day intact. That there's actually a law or order to what's going on, and if I understand, I can actually start to create a very beautiful life and world based on the quality of actions I perform. So it's actually a beautiful thing. And again, it's a far-sighted, it's taking into account these three aspects of time, that whatever is going on right now is based on past karmas. I was talking about this the other day, that very often, if someone has an injury, some figure it out and say, okay, I must have been doing something funny or repetitive mechanics that wasn't quite well aligned. And so this injury, this overuse injury maybe happened, whatever the case, they figure that out. Some might just say, how did this happen to me? I was doing everything, how did this, so that victim kind of feeling. So it's like, okay, well, I'll just tolerate it, I'll get through it. But if I'm lucky, I'll see those realities, oh, I'm glad this happened, because it's actually stopping me from continuing to do something that isn't beneficial. So I want to learn from it so that moving forward, I might do things differently. So seeing things in such a beneficial or benevolent way, such that I continue to grow, that's really what's so okay. According to the law of karma, this happened because I was doing something that created this kind of outcome. Good feedback, very good feedback. So great. If I don't want this to happen anymore, then I may have to look at what actions I was performing and then develop the resources, the tools to perform something different. And thereby I'm creating a different future for myself. So it's quite empowering.
Sometimes I hear the way that karma is used. Maybe it doesn't overtly look like revenge, but it looks like, oh, there's a dynamic between these two individuals or two groups of people. It's probably because they did things to each other in the previous birth. I don't know if that's really, again, a very healthy, if it's sort of, again, quite of a limited understanding.
Yeah, sometimes we have an understanding which actually keeps us very stuck. So yes, maybe they did do something, but if I just keep thinking that, they'll just keep doing it, and they're really stuck in this kind of loop. And then we start to say, I want to be liberated from the wheel of karma. I don't want to perform actions. And it's fascinating that we don't think, let me reform or change my actions. I don't need to be liberated from the wheel of karma or performing actions, but I need to look at changing my actions. And that's going to mean I have to have a different interpretation, perspective, attitude towards what's going on. That's where it begins.
When you were sharing about this aspect of soul consciousness, and sometimes in the study, we're really invited to see things as a game. And I can really understand now that unless I really was going into soul consciousness, I'm not sure really how much that can actually be effective to see things in that perspective.
Yes, it definitely makes me more light. It reminds me that I'm indestructible. I can get through everything. So it's actually helping to, we take so much support from things that are actually quite fragile. And soul consciousness liberates me from doing that. And what we mean is we're taking a lot of support from things that are temporary. We're expecting things that will absolutely change to remain static, whether that's the body or relationships, or jobs, or possessions. These are all things that will, it's not if they change, they will change. And I'm trying to, take so much support from them as if they're static or solid. And that's, quite frankly, insane. Like, that's really setting us up for definite sorrow and distress. So soul consciousness liberates me from doing that and invites me to take support from things that are reliable, that are eternal, that are constant.
So really, basically, I really need to focus a lot on just practicing soul consciousness.
Absolutely. Ultimately, that's the thing, because then I can actually experiment or apply it and see for myself what happens, what kind of soul conscious feelings do I have? What is my soul conscious vision? So I actually do very naturally start to have more benevolent feelings, very uplifted, hopeful vision if I am soul conscious. So until I try it and experiment with it, this is all theoretical.
Would you say there's levels of soul consciousness or levels of truth, meaning there is, of course, absolute truth, and we're moving in that direction? Just because we were talking about fear of death, and then there's also fear of ego's death, which is not like we want ego to stay alive, but I think perhaps it just comes up as different forms of resistance. Then would you say that there's different levels of that in terms of or is it sort of just one single package that you can address overnight, kind of a thing, that you could have some say, yeah, I have no problems with death, but problems of self-respect, like it's not about separating things, but
I think
levels
it is
of reality.
I think it is pretty black and white. I think it is one thing or the other. It seems to take us time.
Maybe that's what it is.
To move closer and closer to it. But it is one thing or the other, and again, it reminds me of pipetting. Yes.
You might have to define what that means.
Well, I'm not quite sure. I just remember my experience of it in grade 8 science lab. I don't know. You probably can explain much better than I.
It's just it's a tube that has gradations of different levels of volume, because you're actually basically sucking up fluid into this thing. Usually you use a bulb to suck it up, but I think you're talking about you're sucking it up with your mouth. That's what a pipette is, yes.
And I remember it was quite small increments, actually, so it was very interesting, because you'd be doing this, adding drop by drop, and suddenly there'd be just one drop and it would completely change.
Sorry. So Judy's talking about when you're adding some chemical into another solution.
Exactly.
So not sucking things up.
No, I don't remember the sucking thing. I'll be completely honest with you.
Well, but you have to draw it up into this column of a certain volume, but then you eventually are
dispense it, I think. I'm looking at this.
I think you jumped over, like, what? Where was I?
So all I remember is drop by drop, adding something to something. Perhaps that was later on in the procedure, but you'd be adding drop by drop. It appeared like nothing was going on. And then suddenly there'd be a drop where, suddenly everything goes pink, or whatever the case might be, the reaction happens. Now we know that the drops leading up to that were required. It was cumulative, but it was a complete all or nothing. It felt like an all or nothing. So I sometimes feel this is kind of our approach, that many often on their spiritual journey, because there's it's as if there's layers that have accumulated on the soul of illusion. And you sort of move through one layer and you're like, oh, I've got it now. I know exactly what's going on. Then you realize, oh, that was just another layer. And, so you really don't quite. And so souls can go for decades, really, and say, have I done anything with all this time? Have I gone? And of course we have. But it just feels like we're revealing more of the illusion than actually getting closer to the truth. But these are all drop by drop steps to get closer and closer. And then suddenly you're in the truth. But we have to go through those steps, those drops. So to see them in that Trikaladarshi way is very, very critical. So I don't become disheartened.
So I feel like as if you read my mind or answered my question, and I was going to ask it, why go into this aspect that there is benefits in three aspects of time? Why not just focus on just soul consciousness?
Because I think we really have to honor the journey, be very aware of what things we're dealing with and might encounter from what we created in the past, and to have a very understanding or compassionate eye for that. Yes, I'm going to practice soul consciousness, but I'm not coming to it with a blank slate. I'm again reminded of, child swimmers versus adult swimmers. Children, very young children who swim, and even they are not blank slates. We have this idea of rebirth, and there are children who are terrified of the water. So usually we say children are great swim. I hear so much, children are natural in the water. Yes, unless they had a very traumatic previous birth experience, they're terrified of the water. I need to know that. So I don't further traumatize that child. We, of course, want them to become comfortable with the water, but I need to know what I'm dealing with so that I can be very compassionate and not punitive and further traumatize, make it worse. So it's really important to kind of know the backstory without abandoning the objective or where I want to, I'm still going to get there, but I'm going to get there in a way that's appropriate and effective by acknowledging the baggage I'm coming with. So in other words, again, there's so much understanding in the full story that it's not sort of very, flat or two-dimensional. So I don't think we're necessarily going to reach the destination, but it's like, okay, I can see how the scene is beneficial given the full story I'm dealing with.
So when there is again this aspect of soul consciousness versus being body conscious, does that also make one quite merciless with oneself when they're body conscious? Because we're talking about being able to be free from fear, to be able to see things in an objective way. But does that body consciousness also sort of make one just focus on one's own weaknesses, focus on things in the past, in a very isolated way in that sense, so that it's not even just about seeing benefit, but being able to see that there really is a backstory?
Soul consciousness is, by its nature, benevolent, free of ego, so very loving and fearless. None of those are going to be available to me if I'm body conscious. So I will always interpret things in a very frightened way and not particularly loving or understanding way. And obviously there'll be that arrogance. So, and there won't be that capacity to really appreciate the benefit. It's just the nature of body consciousness. Again, these are almost states that have their profile. And if that profile is of a body, it's just not possible to bring those qualities to how I'm seeing things. Whereas the soul conscious eye is very benevolent, very loving, very fearless.
So is it possible, I think we always mention this each time, that I could be body conscious trying to see things with benefit in three aspects of time?
Well, that's like me taking off these glasses and saying, I've got my glasses on. I can't. It's not the real thing. I really can't. I remember I was in university and one of the young women who was in the room across from me was what they call legally blind. But perhaps out of vanity, whatever the case, she didn't like to wear her glasses or anything. And I always felt this was dangerous, that she was wandering around as if she was absolutely fully sighted, and she wasn't, and so I can't really fake it, if you will. It's going to lead to accidents. So it needs to be the real thing. And the accidents are beneficial because they're telling me it wasn't the real thing. So there's also benefit in that.
I wish I remember what I was going to ask, but I don't remember what I was going to ask. Oh yes, now I do. Thank goodness. soul consciousness in relation to Trikaldarshi, maybe it's a separate question itself. What would you feel is a sign that you're soul conscious? I know sometimes souls say peace, but face it, sometimes souls can be sitting here in a very peaceful experience with lovely music, lovely lighting, and they're feeling peace. But that doesn't mean that they're soul conscious.
Well, I think the answer was in the way you asked the question. It's in those situations that are not peaceful, and I still. So
But I think souls want to know before.
They want to know before. I was just with some souls who have dedicate their lives to practicing steadiness, and it's such a different quality of interaction down to the level of vibration. It is a deep sense of peace that is independent of what's going on. So yes, I probably want to know before something aversive or challenging, but I'll definitely find out when something aversive or challenging is, because that peaceful state will be intact. But also in respect to the question, I would be able to see and feel everything within the self, towards others, with situations. Stay very light. I feel that this lightness, this simplicity, this deep contentment. We had a class this morning that spoke about this deep, deep contentment that is on the face, actually, that really actually makes others content. And I think we know that because when we talk about little infants, they're actually very close to soul consciousness. And it's just their purity, their sweetness. It makes us smile. It's, so this is really, there'd be such a natural lightness and sweetness and easiness that is on the face, in the heart, but also you can see it in terms of how the others are interacting with you.
I have to say that what I appreciate about the Raja Yoga interviews is it always brings us back to what is the quality of soul consciousness for any of these capacities within me, the soul, these capacities of how we see things and manage and respond, really has, again, to do with that. And it's so easy to sort of jump ahead.
And with your question, I was thinking of something this morning that happened where I received a note that was a bit of a correction. It was a request, and there was a little correction in it. And we just had a class this morning that was so much about being so full, so content, so fortunate that you just give. And I remember this came in, and at first it was sort of, I could feel the reaction, which tells me I'm not soul conscious in response to what you're saying. How would you know? I felt a low reaction, and I could see all sorts of thoughts, and it was quite fascinating. And then sort of started to that Trikaladarshi, that it's very good this is happening. There's a resolution in this happening, actually. It's moving things in a clean direction. I could really feel that. And I wrote a note, and when I wrote the note to thank them, I could tell, okay, you're not soul conscious right now. You're writing what a soul conscious person would write, but you are actually not soul conscious right now. And again, the sign, some of those trace feelings were still there. So this is it's a very deep thing when we say very pure feelings come naturally. It's not intellectually, I should have pure feelings. I should try to become, but I've still got those other emotions going on. It's completely clean, and souls will feel it. So there's just this beautiful, pure state inside when I'm soul conscious in response, and the reactions don't even happen.
When you were saying that you noticed that you were seeing through the three aspects of time that there is, what did you call those?
Resolution.
Could you clarify what you mean?
Well, we can sometimes let situations, we call it getting away with it. We can sometimes let situations go on for a while, sort of getting away with it because it fulfills our desires. Deep down, we know it's not quite clean, but everyone else does it, and no one's really saying anything, and it's kind of almost a relief.
Sorry, what was the relief of
of someone actually correcting it, not letting us get away with it anymore. Some part of us finds a relief in that. Part of us is irritated because our desires are being frustrated, but the pure part of us is kind of relieved. That, it's sort of like if you're telling a lie, and it's not that I was telling a lie, but if you're telling the example, if you're telling a lie, and you're kind of getting away with it, no one's really noticing. It's a small lie, and but eventually someone comments on it. Part of you might be embarrassed or ashamed, but another part of you is kind of relieved that you can come clean, and that's very beneficial. It's very good that we like actually for things to be clean, but our desires do not allow us to keep things clean. They want things to happen a certain way. So try and get away with it.
So I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to clarify when you were talking about, because I wasn't sure if you meant resolution in terms of, oh, it's good so that I could see it wasn't soul conscious, or it was good in terms of whatever that project that was about.
Both. So it was good in terms of resolving that issue, but also how I was responding to the correction. That was also a resolution in terms of looking at the quality of my effort, my soul consciousness. So both.
Right. I feel like we need a whole new interview when it comes to managing that, because you can see how ego gets all grumpy and trying to get myself back into, I wouldn't say get myself, but to watch ego, to be able to have that capacity to watch all that and not be affected is, I feel it would be a capacity that everyone would love to have. But that is for another session. So hopefully we should close with a little reflection.
And I find myself looking outwards the windows of the physical eyes. But rather than focusing, thinking about what I'm looking at, I focus on the one looking, me, the observer. And what state am I in as I look out through the eyes? Am I bored? Am I curious? Am I disheartened, distressed, anxious? What state am I in? Am I aligned? In a true, free, light state that comes when I remember I am a soul. I'm going to get through anything and everything. I am eternal. And I am built with this heart that loves purity, loves peace, loves happiness. My true nature, when I'm completely aligned, it's very peaceful, very content, very simple, almost blissful. And that's silly. How do I look out through these physical eyes when I'm in a very contented state?
Thank you for joining with us this evening. Those on YouTube as well as Instagram. Once again, if you have any topics that you would like explored, you're welcome to send a message in the chat box or email the center. So just a couple of updates. Our next online session is tomorrow, second part of the 4-part series of Meditation 101, addressing different myths of meditation with respect to how meditation is used in Raja Yoga. And we are opening the center up gradually. And so we are updating the website. We'll be sending that message out. So that will affect some of the programs as well. So they're offered on site. So welcome to visit the website for other online sessions. Om Shanti.